Great, and we're recording. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line I have something a little different today. I'm speaking with Jessie Shternshus. Stare at your shoes. Stare at your shoes.
Perfect.
It's an interesting, it's a great last name. But Jessie, you're the founder of Improv Effect and the co-author of CTRL Shift. It's a book called CTRL Shift, 50 Games for 50 Sternshusing Days Like Today. 50 evening days today. We'll talk about that. So I'll definitely get to this book. So it's a great book title. You Make Shift Happen. So
Yes.
we'll also get into that. But let's start with the first question, which I always start with, which is, tell us what your virtual office looks like. What do you need to get your work done?
So I definitely need my MacBook and I need some sort of headphone and microphone. Other than that, I can really be working from anywhere. And since I work worldwide, I often have my office, my London office and my California office, but it's really in a hotel room. It's not super sexy or anything. And sometimes when, service isn't working well, then all sorts of craziness ensues. I've had those issues where I have to be in my car and have my office.
It is amazing how many hotels have bad internet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, even when we're willing to pay. Hotels, if you're listening.
Yes, hotels, come in, please. Please give us free internet service.
And or just good internet service.
Or something.
So, do you work with employees, or are you a one-woman show?
Yeah, so I hired my first employee this summer. So I have one other full-time employee, and then I have a handful of subcontractors all over the place.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how you work with your company, with these people remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll go into writing the book and also working with teams who are doing virtual work. So how does your team operate?
So we typically either get on like a Google Hangout or we do a Skype call, and we've been using a lot of Trello to kind of put together the curriculum and how we're going to build the training programs for people. So we do a lot of that, and we have like a system for the cards so that each card can tell like the objective of the game or exercise, a description, and then we can move around the cards and we can put the different people who might lead that game, their face on the card, so you can easily see like how it's going to work in the actual day when we're there and that kind of thing. So that's one we use pretty often.
Okay, so you're talking to each other mainly via Hangouts and Skype,
Mm-hmm.
and then task management mainly through Trello.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And probably Trello or Google Docs is another one we use a lot of as well.
And what's challenging about the way that you guys work?
I mean, obviously there's trickiness that sort of comes with not having everybody face to face. My one full-time employee does live in Florida in Jacksonville with me, so typically we can be in the same room more often than not. But making sure that the culture and the needs and everything comes across the way that you intended, and making sure that everybody's on the same page with maybe not having them in the room. There's obviously some things that could be misinterpreted or questions that maybe didn't get asked, things like that.
And why go remote? Why be remote?
So we have work all over the world. And we're typically not in the same place, every couple weeks we're somewhere else. So it really lends itself to needing to be mobile, being able to move around and do work from different places. So if we're working in London and there's a day in between, we might be having virtual meetings there with another client back in the States, and it makes it easier. And also there's not the overhead, obviously, of having an office for everybody. We can work out of our home or wherever we are at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's sort of a necessity where you're traveling all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be in touch with people.
Yeah, and that thing needs to be flexible. It has to be flexible.
So let's dive into improv a bit and what you do with your business, because I think it's really interesting. I've been exploring the idea. It's been rolling around in my head. People are encouraging me
Do
to
it.
use improv. Why is it so important? What is it that you actually use improv for in businesses? Okay, that's two big questions. Sorry to
No
throw it at
worries. So basically, I've been doing improv since I was a kid, since I was 10. And I was doing it like in a children's theater class when I first started. And I just really loved the idea of improv in terms of being accepting of all the different types of people and types of stories and types of way of doing things. And that's accepted, your uniqueness is accepted and built off of. So that's a pretty addictive environment to be in. And so I just never stopped. And then as I did it for years and years and years, I realized that a lot of the tools and things that I was learning had life beyond the stage, that it didn't have to be about being funny. I was learning how to think on the spot. I was learning how to collaborate with other people, to have self-awareness, to understand other people's ideas or stories and play off of those things. And there's so many tie-ins to business and the real world that improv can teach you.
I can imagine. The thinking on the spot is the one that always comes up for me the most, where I'm, there's all those people that are hiding behind their laptops, we're the thinkers of the world who are afraid to.
Right. And the thing is, like, all of these things that we expect people to do every day in their working world, we expect them to do, but we don't give them any way to practice it, and it's funny, like, we help people all the time practice technical things. And yet, half of what we expect them to do and half of the things they're going to be sort of graded on, are these softer things, and nobody's helped them to do it. And so improv is a really fun way to practice just being better at really being present and really seeing what each moment needs, and being able to be flexible and know that moments change, and the way you do things, the way you present yourself needs to change with what's given at that time.
Do you get kickback from companies? Because it sounds to me like this would be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Improv just seems like whenever you see pictures or videos, people are always laughing because of the silliness that comes out.
Yeah.
Do you have problems selling that to businesses?
I think at first, when I first started my company, it was learning and practicing how to help a client understand the connections between real value and that, yes, it's fun, but there's so much more. And as we've gone along, at least for the past 5 years, everything that we put together is based on whatever company's their strategy is or what objectives they're trying to meet that fall under either communication, collaboration, or creative problem solving. And then we kind of get down to like the nitty gritty to find out, okay, when we work with you over this period of time, what deliverables do you want? What are the outcomes that you want? And then we'll kind of reverse engineer the training to that. So every exercise that we do, not only is it fun, it might be changing the dynamic. It might be with a pair, a large group, a small group, just keep switching. So it's more like real life. And then at the end of every exercise, we talk about what did you get out of this, the debrief, right? So what did you learn? What could you use? How could you apply it? And so that way they understand that there's so much more value other than just fun.
And when businesses are coming to you, what is it that they're trying to solve initially when they're searching for you?
Yeah, so usually I would say there's a couple of things that are pretty typical. It usually falls under their professional development. So things like cross-functional teamwork or communication. And that could be both an internal team or an external team or even to their client if they're like a consultancy or something like that. Then there's other things around like presentation skills. So people being comfortable speaking in front of others. And again, both formal and informal. And then I would say another thing is creative problem solving. So we help them push their brains in different ways and think about their product or process in a different way and help them come up with a strategy to come out with something new or make something better. And the first thing we even do in that kind of training is help them with communication and collaboration, right? So if they can't get along and they can't listen to each other, there's no reason that you should problem solve, because that's your problem, right? So they kind of all nicely go together. And same thing, if they come up with a great strategy or a product afterwards and they can't speak to it, they can't present it to other people, then it's only as good as the idea and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's nice how they sort of all tie in. And I would say the other big thing that clients have been coming to us is onboarding. So helping them, helping them like assess how their onboarding program is, or if it even exists, and how to make it more experiential and make it match their culture and values more, and help them sort of build out that program and then help train people to facilitate it.
So you say if it even exists. So that's implying there's a number of companies that don't have onboarding processes. That's also been my experience. Usually when I've started at a company, I just show up and they show me my desk, and then you're just sitting there.
Yeah, then crickets, exactly.
Yeah, really. I couldn't believe it, actually.
Yeah, so we find that a lot, that is a very similar experience that many new hires are having. And the ironic thing is their culture, their values, what they say their culture of values is not shown in that very first touch point at all. So it's sort of like, it may just seem like fluff, really, and so what we want to do is kind of get to what are the core values, like what do you really care about at the end of the day? What was your value proposition to even get this person to come work here? And how can you make that come to life the second they walk in the door, or sometimes even before they walk in the door?
Right. I can imagine there's lots of opportunities for touch points. And
yeah, and it goes back to those things again, usually culture, communication, tools, problem solving, all those things again that I talked about that we do anyway, are needed in sort of that onboarding system or framework that they put together.
Yeah, I keep hearing people say with employee engagement that most people come to work motivated, because you're coming to a job motivated, and it's up to the job not to demotivate you after you've gotten there. So
right, and it happens a lot. Like typically somebody will come in and they'll say, okay, go check out this wiki page or whatever, and the wiki page is completely outdated. Nobody even knows they showed up to work, depending on how fast the company's growing. And there's no formal introduction. And I mean that it could be remote too. There's nothing that helps them feel what they wanted to feel when they walked in the door. So we can help them get there.
Super interesting. So we'll talk about remote teams in a second, and your experience with virtual teams. But first I want to talk about this book. I think this is I don't want to forget to talk about it because it's so brilliant. So Control Shift, 50 games for 50 beeping days like today. And tell us about the book and why you wrote it and what this is about. And also how you wrote it, which is super interesting.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with first how we wrote it. So I wrote it with another person, and we actually worked on it for 2 years, and we never once were like in the same room face to face.
Wow.
And so we worked on it in a very improv-y way, meaning like we were collaborating through like chat functions and thinking of ideas and then literally finishing each other's sentences. So very yes and mentality, like, oh, you're giving me an idea and I'm building off it. And the chapters literally came out that way. So there are many chapters and segments in the book. We have no idea who wrote what because it was so collaborative. And like I said, it was completely virtual. So it was a great experience. And the reason we did the book is, from, again, letting people understand that there are lots of ways to solve or hack your day. And there's many things that come out of experiential exercises and improv that could help you do that. So the idea of the book is helping you shift in a controlled environment. How can you move within the set of circumstances to come out where you want to be? And so each chapter is a different kind of day that you might be having, a scenario. And then inside of that chapter is a game that you could play to help you make it through that day. So that's the idea.
Wow. And how did you meet your co-author?
So actually, he was somebody I secretly loved his his first book, and crazy story. So anyway, he wrote this other book called Game Changers, and I loved it. And at some point, we got connected with each other on a project where we were told that we are both really good with improv and really good with sort of the engineering agile things. So we were both hired to do the same project together. And by the end of the first day, he said, "Do you want to write a book with me?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you have no idea, how crazy this is," because
don't squeal.
Right. I felt like I was being punked, to be honest, And I had an idea for a book, but I really wanted to write it with somebody else because of my improv background. I really enjoy collaborating with people. I like playing in that way. And so I had envisioned that if I did a book, it would be with somebody else. And what better than to be with this person that I was like secretly a fangirl of. So not a secret anymore.
Awesome. And you did it virtually because you guys are different places.
Exactly. He's in California and I'm in Florida. So the way for us to get things done was to work on it virtually.
Wow, very exciting. So now you mentioned Agile, and I want to ask, what is your connection with Agile? You gave a keynote at Agile 2015, so clearly the connection there is strong. How are you involved in the Agile world?
So I kind of fell into it. So some of my very first corporate clients were in software development and engineering. And I really loved the marriage of what I was bringing to the table and what they were bringing to the table. And even though you think it's kind of an odd combination, like what software developer or engineer would want to do improv, you would think probably none, right? But here it was, and it was working, and it was working really well, and it kept working. And so I kept being in these environments where I was hearing things about Agile and stand-up meetings and retrospectives. I'm like, what is this stuff? And as I started exploring it more, I realized the Agile Manifesto was basically exactly like an improv manifesto. I mean, word for word, the things and theories and ideas that were important to Agile are the things that are really important to improv. And so I thought, well, why not use these things as other ways to do this stuff? So that's kind of how it happened.
It's a great crossover. It's true, because I don't think of improv and software engineers in the same thought area. Somehow.
Yeah, and 90% of our business is in the sort of software and design space. So
awesome.
That's how we make a living. Yeah, it's crazy.
So now you do a lot of your workshops, they're in person, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you do virtual workshops?
Yeah, so we usually do virtual pieces of training or virtual like building of curriculum. So like to go back to onboarding, we would help them like collaborate on where they want to go and do all of that virtually. And then eventually we would come in and do in person, train the trainer so that they can do it themselves later. So a lot of the building of that stuff happens virtually. And also every now and then we'll do like ideations where we take the group of people in the room and we just run them through different exercises and frameworks to help them come up with some sort of strategy. And we can do that as well virtually. So,
okay.
Yeah. And for me personally, it's been nice to find things and projects that can be done virtually, or at least parts of them, because before, every single time we had any work, we would have to be physically in the room. And that can be extremely taxing, and I have a family and all those things. So it's been really fun to experiment and find ways that I can have more of a balance in my life. And some of that comes from being able to do virtual work.
And how do you, what kind of virtual team, are there virtual teams that are coming to you? There are teams that are working together virtually. So let's talk about that. That is something that I'm super curious about.
Yeah, so there are mostly, in our case, they're tech companies where the company, in order to find the, set of skills that they're looking for, they just have to be able to offer virtual work and remote work. So once they do that, these people typically have really great technical chops, but they want to make sure that these people can pair together or work together virtually and are motivated and trust each other. And so what we'll do is help them kind of come in and again kind of assess like, what is your culture, what is important to you, and then build things that those virtual team members can do virtually to work towards those those outcomes beyond the technical stuff.
Do you have an example that you can share? I don't know if you do. I'm just trying to visualize it.
Yeah, so I mean, for one, maybe let's say somebody is new to the team or they've hired a couple of new people and they're all in different spaces. We might do like an introduction game that I call introduction tiebacks. So everybody would introduce themselves one by one. So if I was introducing myself first, I would say a couple of sentences about like who I am and my background, what I love. And then the next person to go, wherever they are, would need to tie something into what I said to their introduction.
Oh.
And so as you go through the team, you're finding not only the things that are unique about people, but the way stories and their backgrounds can be tied together. And then below the surface, you're basically teaching them to really listen, and that's a collaborative thing, right? So typically when you're introducing yourself to people in a networking sense or in the beginning, like you're just kind of waiting for your turn to talk, and because maybe you're nervous about having to talk in front of people, even virtually. So this way, you're making them really stay present and in the moment and be creative and problem solve ways that they can tie things together.
Oh, I really love that because it's true. I mean, even though I speak in front of people a lot and I go to a lot of functions, I still get nervous when I'm sitting there waiting for my name, for me to, and I'm just introducing myself like I know more about myself than anybody,
Right.
Expert.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a sentiment that most people feel. That's really nerve-wracking, especially if they're new to the team as well. They kind of want to make sure people understand and believe in their ability to do whatever job they were given. And if that's a really simple thing you can do virtually.
Lovely. What do you see virtual teams that you're working with? What are they struggling with oftentimes? I mean, I know there's a lot of things, but.
Yeah, I think typically it's the way that they communicate with each other. So they're not hyper aware of how they come across. And because one of their senses is taken away, it's even more difficult, right? So knowing how somebody perceives you, knowing what role to play when, those things are pretty difficult to do. And also understanding your audience, what has that person been going through that day? Or what does this person care about or not? And how do you adjust the way you communicate with them in order to, get to the vision or the goal or whatever it is?
Yeah, I can imagine that would be hard for any team, virtual or not. But then on a virtual team, it's so much harder because most of the time people aren't seeing each other. Though with video technology, I hope that changes over time.
Yeah, I think it's changing for the better in terms of the video technology. I think that definitely helps. We do things like helping teams with power dynamics, so that under the surface thing that's going on in every conversation, and really understanding how what you say or what you do affects the dynamic between you and somebody else or you and a group of people. And again, practicing making you aware of those things and helping them just kind of play in a fun way, play with status. So I might say, okay, I want you to be, I want you to be a high negative personality. And here's the thing, here's the way you need to act. Here's how it would come across. And I want this other person, I want you to play like really low positive. So you're the type of person who speaks up when needed and everybody loves what you have to say, but you're not like a steamrolling personality. And so just kind of having fun playing with what those dynamics even feel like helps people understand that they're going on every day.
Do you find that there's, I don't know how often do you do workshops with people in different cultures, like different countries working together? I'm only assuming these games and these exercises can only help that situation, but.
Yeah, so we do both in person and virtually. Lots of companies with teams all over the place, and culture plays a huge factor, not just necessarily because they're from another country. I mean, in the States, it could even be just north and the south is completely different, right? And so like letting these frameworks be open enough so that it's authentic to their culture and their values, but it still shares the same vision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just something I see lots of teams struggling with, and it's I want to be able to give advice. Like if you have many cultures, try, I always just say stop, slow down, ask more questions, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't know what you don't know.
Right. Improv, we learn like why it's important to take a breath between thoughts, between ideas, and how important like active listening is. Like all of those skills come out of improv that help you communicate better.
So the improv, it sounds like you're really teaching interpersonal skills
Yep.
between people, like learning how to be self-aware and
Mm-hmm.
things that probably every person on the planet could improve. I mean,
Amen.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I think that, people going into these kind of scenarios, typically, like if I'm in their shoes, they're typically thinking, oh, dear God, like what, I'm going to want to run out of the building. Like you're going to make me be funny. You're going to embarrass me. And as soon as they realize that these are skills you're expected to do every day, and they're not about being embarrassing, and they're not about being, comedic, they can be that way, but they don't have to be. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I am expected to know how to do these things, and I've never practiced any of it before. And this is kind of fun,
How do you create a safe environment for people to feel comfortable practicing these things? Because I can imagine that even if you're like, oh, I get it, like I see that this is a skill that I could be using, maybe people are still hesitant. I don't know if there's teams where
Yeah.
it's not safe to do it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that is really important in terms of the facilitator. The facilitator, within the first few minutes, has to win everybody over and has to create a trusting environment, or otherwise it's just a complete train wreck, right? Like you can't do these things and put yourself out there if you feel like you can't trust people. So what we do is we build training with that in mind, thinking, okay, in the worst case scenario, these people are probably really nervous. They may not even know what they're about to do. And maybe there's some crazy power dynamic or trust thing that's going on. What can we do to design this program to, in the first 5 minutes, earn their trust and make them feel comfortable? So the first thing is make them feel comfortable, right? So we'll do things where there's not like all attention on one individual, but that maybe they're all working in pairs at the same time, simultaneously, or they're all working as a group collaboratively, so they're not singled out. And only typically at the end of a training would we maybe work to that, and only when it's like presentation skills or something like that. But
Right.
more often than not, they have partners and they are changing partners and getting to know why these people are incredible on their team.
Oh, really cool. Are there things that virtual teams do better than co-located teams? Or worse?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just thought of it. It's not on the list. I'm sorry. It was totally, I
It's
just thought,
okay.
oh, maybe there's something that when you do it virtually, there's something that comes out that you think, oh, that could never have been done in the same space. Or maybe I don't know, it was just.
I would have to think about that. I think depends on the dynamic of the team, I would think. So it might be that because they're virtual, they can get more done, that maybe they're more efficient. But if efficient gets in the way of a great culture, then I think it backfires, right? So I think in all of these scenarios, there has to be like a nice balance of what we care about beyond just what we're working at, but with each other. And for me, in a virtual scenario, you need to be even more hyper aware of how you come across and how that affects people. And like you said, ask questions, ask them if it makes sense, tell them to explain it back to you, because otherwise you're moving on and then people are losing where you were 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, I had to do an exercise like that where I had to explain back to the person what they had just stated, and I kept getting it wrong over and over again. It was such an eye-opener for me because
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I've got this, no problem. And I completely failed the experiment. I thought, oh, wow, I need to do this more often.
Yeah, we do exercises like that all the time, so people can see that even the best people with the best of intentions can't necessarily remember every single thing. And actually, now that I think about it, in a virtual setting, one thing that you could definitely do is, take notes in a virtual way and be able to kind of capture that stuff maybe better than you might in an in-person scenario. And so that you would maybe be able to pass on that information in a more succinct way than you maybe could if there's a lot of distractions in terms of everybody in the room.
That's true, because virtually you're probably taking notes or
Yeah.
doing something in the chat,
Yeah.
whereas in the room you're just
you're just there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I didn't think of that. So are there particular tools that you use in your workshop virtually with teams that you're talking to them, or is it just the standard Skype and Hangouts and?
So, I mean, we do use a lot of Trello. So let's say we go in and we're working with a company on their professional development program, and we meet with them, we work with them on presentation skills, and then we leave. So what we'll do is we'll put some exercises in a Trello board and design that specifically for them. So it's customized so that they can continue the momentum and practice while we're not there, and then we can go over some of those exercises with them on a Google Hangout or a Skype call until we get back to being with them in person. So we use that as a great way to give them things for the interim.
Okay. And personality types. I have to, because it really comes up a lot, especially in software engineers, you have the stereotypes. There's so many stereotypes of introverts and people with interpersonal skill issues. What do you see? What kind of personality types are lend itself more to improv or thrive more in improv or could use improv? I don't know. I guess this is really an open question of what about personality?
It's totally fine. So believe it or not, I think many people that would consider themselves more of an introvert actually are really great at improv. And the reason being is they're good listeners. So improv is so important to be able to understand what you need to do and what's happening from moment to moment. And if you're sort of that steamrolling personality who's extremely outgoing but not paying attention to other people, even though you're super vocal, you're not actually as good at improv. So it takes even longer for people like that to first understand that they need the help and to teach them how to listen better. They're usually used to hearing themselves talk.
Right.
That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. I didn't even think of that. There's the excellent listening skills, and really being present is probably lends itself.
And that goes back to why I said that marriage of sort of the engineer, the software, the designer really works well with what we're trying to achieve. So even though they may be scared in the beginning, it's actually a great fit and they're actually really good at it. And they're typically, witty and quick and things like that too. So that kind of helps the scenario. One other thing I was thinking is we've been doing this. It's not really a personality test so much, but there's this great book from IDEO called The 10 Faces of Innovation. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So it's really awesome. And I like it because we're typically in these really innovative environments, but where there's a lot of stereotypes happening, where they think if your role doesn't seem like the typical innovation thing, you're not an innovative person or you're not creative. And that's not true. And so what we've developed is we've kind of yes-anded that book and played off of it. And we have this spider graph of all these different types of innovative personalities that they list in that book. And we have them use this, and you can do this virtually again or in person. We have them graph all the different 10 things of what they feel most like and where they don't. And then they can do that with somebody else on their team and kind of see if there's gaps or see how together they're a better collaborative, innovative team because they make up all of these things versus just a couple. Same with hiring, typically people kind of hire people like themselves. And so this kind of shows you, okay, on our team, we have this, and this kind of innovator, and we're really missing this thing. And so when we hire, let's keep that in mind to find that kind of person or personality.
Right. Oh, that sounds really interesting. Oh, I love it. Now I'm gonna have to go out and sign up for what.
Yeah, gotta do it.
Oh, I really have to. People really have been telling me for years to do this. So
I'm so surprised that you don't, to be honest. It just I don't know, it seems to align perfectly with what you seem to really care about. So I think you'll like it if you can get yourself to the class. You'll
Yeah,
enjoy it.
I'll get there for sure. I mean, one of my best friends it comes up a lot. So now I'm like, all right, already.
Yeah, be quiet.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that leads into really well into the last question, which is if people want to find out more and get in touch and bring improv into their team I mean, I can only imagine this is really great for team building and communication skills. And because on remote teams, communication is king. I mean, that's really, I haven't met a single company yet that's like, nah, communication's really good. It's something else that is the problem.
Yeah. That's always the breakdown. The breakdown is always communication.
It's always communication, I think.
Yeah.
So if people want to improve that in their companies, I can't see why you wouldn't. How can they get in touch with you?
I totally agree with that statement. They can go on the website. So it's improveffect.com, and it looks like improve if the words are put together, but it's actually Improv Effect. So you see that little slip in there. And on there they can find descriptions of types of classes and the companies that we've worked with, and they can find a way to contact us and all of that. And then there's other things out there on the Googles, where they can listen to talks or podcasts and kind of get a feel for what it is that we do.
Yeah, I've got the website open now, and there's a YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, all
everything.
And find out big names for clients.
Yeah, because people need those things. They're having issues with the way people work together and the way people communicate. So, companies big and small struggle with those same things.
Yeah. Yep. I also see it in my work. I've been very surprised at the people that are seeking workshops. It's these very big companies. And I think, but you've been working globally forever. This is it's been global, but it just goes to show that communication is really hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And it gets harder because there's just so much going on from minute to minute. There's just so many distractions. So to really be focused on one thing is pretty difficult. It's getting harder.
Yeah. Especially with information overload.
Yes. Our brains are exploding.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. I really appreciate talking with you. It's very exciting what you're doing, and I really wish you the best of luck on this. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Until next time, be powerful.